Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be interviewing one of the greatly underrated great actors that came from the 80s, Jay Patterson. You all may know him as the very evil Brother Constance in the 1985 cult classic teen movie, Heaven Help Us. A lot of you nerds out there may know him as Charles Pennington in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first movie from 1990. But he's also been in a lot of Robert Benton's movies like Places in the Heart and Nadine. And he was in Ted 2 a few years ago, the Seth MacFarlane movie. I'm having him on the show today to talk about all of that and talk about his distinguished theater career. He founded a theater company in Minnesota called Penumbra Theater Company back in the 70s, and I'm going to ask him about all that stuff, and I can't wait. It is going to be so awesome to be talking to an amazing actor like Jay Patterson. So, here is my interview with Jay Patterson. Hey, Jay.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. How are you, sir?
I am fine.
Well, welcome to the show. It's such an honor, sir.
Well, it's an honor to do it. It should be fun.
Yes, it often is.
How to begin and where to start?
Yes. So going back in time, did you fall in love with acting early on?
Oh, yeah. I can remember exactly when it happened. I know I'm dating myself by getting this specific, but my mother took me to see To Kill a Mockingbird when it came out in 1962, the black and white version with
Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck and Mary Badham, and Brock Peters.
Yep.
And I was just enthralled with that. I was just mesmerized by that film. And when I left the movie theater, I felt uplifted, and at the same time, I felt like I had my eyes open. Like that. Yeah. The world is not a terrific place a lot of the time. And my mom, I was 8, by the way. I was 8 years old. And my mom and I talked about the film Heading Home, and she said something like, I can't remember her words exactly. It's been so long ago, but she said, if you want to be a truly noble person, the world is not going to support you in that.
Nice.
And that's when you find out how noble you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I asked her, do people do that for a living? And she said, do what? I said, be in movies. And I could see her like, oh, God, no.
Yeah.
But the feeling that I came away with was I want to be a part of telling a story that'll make an audience feel the way I feel now. I want to be a part of something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my wish. I mean, the first film I ever made was many, many years later, a movie called Places in the Heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that, it's set in the same time period. It's set in the Deep South during the Depression. That film was actually shot in the town that my father had been born in.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was still alive when we filmed Places. He died about 6 weeks after I wrapped on that film, so he never got to see it.
Oh.
But I have a couple of friends that I went to high school with and college with who are English teachers now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have told me that they showed their classes both of those movies. Mm-hmm. And then they ask their classes to compare and contrast them. And that just blew me away when I heard that.
Yeah.
To have something that I was in compared to a movie like To Kill a Mockingbird. Because it just... And then after Mockingbird, like a couple of years later, there was a touring company of the play Mr. Roberts that came through Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have seen it at the Taft auditorium, or it may have even been done at the old Cincinnati Playhouse that was built in 1911, but that got boarded up and was dormant for a long time. I'm not sure what theater it played in, but I can remember sitting in the audience watching that, and I saw this steel hoop being suspended from the flies by a thin wire, and then anchored from below down into the stage floor by another thin wire. And I saw the wires, and I knew that was the hoop and not a porthole on a ship. But here's these two grown men with gray hair sitting at a small table having coffee, and I knew there was no coffee in the cup. But the way they held their cups and sipped out of them, and they took turns looking out this hoop that was supposed to be a porthole on a ship. And I thought, wow, grown men do this. I mean, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And if they're willing to make an investment in it, I guess I am too. All right. And the whole world of it just enthralled me. You know, people conspiring together to tell a story like that. I mean, how cool is that? You know,
I know.
And I mean, my father was he's like, oh God, don't get into that business. You'll starve. You know, maybe 1 out of every 500 people that get in it are able to earn a living at it, and you have to travel all the time. And if you're married, it'll wreck your marriage because you're on the road a lot, and you're always going to be worried about money unless you're a big star, and it's not an easy life. And he was right.
Yeah.
My dad was born in Texas. He grew up in Alabama. He was a welder. He was a foreman of welders. So he understood the value of having a good, steady job that paid well. You know, and he's like, boy, you better learn how to do something that people won't. He's like, God, I wish you'd get out of that. You know, he was not wild about the fact that I got into it. And then after he could see that I was serious about it, nobody was more supportive than him.
Oh, that's great. Wow. That's pretty profound. You majored in theater at Ohio University, and you were a founding member of Penumbra, the theater company in Minnesota. Yeah. How did that come about, and how did you end up in Minnesota?
Well, that's a relationship. I got out of college in '77, and the woman that I was living with wanted to go to San Francisco.
That's where I'm from.
I'm like, why do you want to go to San Francisco? We are not in the unions yet. Neither of us are a member of the performing artists unions. There isn't enough theater in San Francisco, especially non-union theater. Of all the places to go, why do you want to go there? And I got talked into it, and I allowed myself to be talked into it because I wanted that relationship to work. We've all done that.
Yeah.
She was from the Twin Cities area. She grew up in Minneapolis. So after we left school in Athens, Ohio, we started to drive to San Francisco. We stopped in the Twin Cities to spend some time with her mother. And while we were there, a classmate of ours from Ohio University heard about this mixed-race theater company that was being put together in St. Paul. And he said, Jay, if you want me to, I will call the artistic director, Louis Bellamy, and I will tell him about you. You know, maybe you can get an audition because they're putting a company together. It'll be mostly African-American, but they are going to need a few white actors. So I said, sure, tell him about me. So he did. I called Louis Bellamy. I arranged an audition. I went over there, and I did some pieces for him, and he hired me on the spot.
Wow.
And not long after that, the relationship that I was in ended, and I moved to St. Paul, and I worked at Penumbra for a year.
Wow.
And it was an education. I think I learned more working at penumbra in 1 year than I learned in 4 years at Ohio University.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a minority racially. I had to take the temperature on my own attitudes about race. I got shown. I was compelled to function in a different way. I had to look at the world through a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I can give you a specific example of this. We did a show that toured several schools in the area, a show called The Taking of Miss Janie by Ed Bullins.
Right.
And since we were a non-equity theater at that time, the actors had to install the set, hang the lights, all that stuff. And like I said, we did this play several places, and the vice principal or the business manager or the head of the English department or whoever's job it was, the person who had the job that made them responsible for greeting and interacting with companies that were bringing things in would come to us while we were uploading the stuff. And I can't tell you how many times they would walk up to me, because I'm white, and just automatically assume that I was in charge.
Wow.
So one of the African-American actors who, I'm sorry to say, recently passed away, a wonderful actor named Abdul Salam Il Razak. He was in the movie Glory, and he did he did a ton of stuff, a lot of August Wilson's plays. Mm-hmm. Abdul saw this look of befuddlement on my face one day after I had one of these conversations with, the person at the school. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me with this big smile on his face, and he said, well, I guess they can see we ain't taking you hostage, so you must be the one running things.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I mean, it was an education. Did we always get along with each other? Hell no.
Yeah.
We had these. We used to have these things. We would have like one of them every 2 or 3 months. We came to call them sensitivity meetings, and what would end up happening was everybody was yelling at each other.
Yeah.
and I thought, well, it's only been in like the last 10 or 15 years where something like this could even happen. The company was funded by CETA, and this was a federal program under Jimmy Carter's administration. Mm-hmm. I think it stood for the Comprehensive Employment Training Act. Mm-hmm. And the theater, which was housed at the Hallie Q. Brown Community Center, had a theater space in it, and they were given a grant, and that's how we got paid. We were paid just like government employees. We were paid twice a month. The 1st and then the 15th of each month. And it was not great money, but it was enough to live on in 1978 in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I wouldn't trade that year for anything. I made a couple of friends that are still friends of mine to this day, Marion McClinton and Jay Dub and Terry Bellamy. Mm-hmm. Jay Dub is short for James Austin Williams. He's probably the only American actor that did both the first and the last plays that August Wilson wrote.
Wow.
August Wilson's last play was Radio Golf, and J-Dub did the national tour of it, and then they brought it into New York and did it on Broadway. I've seen him do Jitney. I've seen him do the piano lesson. He directed me in a production of The Blood Knot in Minneapolis 40 years ago. He and I worked together at the Baltimore Center Stage in a production of Les Blancs by Lorraine Hansberry that Marion McClinton directed. Mm-hmm. Marion McClinton directed King Hedley on Broadway, and he also directed the production of Jitney that was the old Union Square Theater. That's now not even a theater anymore. They're gutting it, preserving the shell of the building and building condos in it, Natch.
Yeah.
And so after Penumbra, we got our funding cut in the middle of a pay period because they discontinued CETA. Congress did that.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't tell us, that our money had been cut off. So we knew the season was ending. So we got what we knew was probably going to be our last paychecks anyway, and they were for less than half of what they normally were.
Wow.
So I had to do we all had to scuffle, we all had to work other jobs. They asked us to stay in the Twin Cities area.
Mm-hmm.
We were hoping to reassemble the company and get new sources of funding. And that it took a while to happen. And in the meantime, I did interior demolition work. I hung sheetrock. I wound up working as a security guard in a bank.
Mm-hmm.
I did whatever I needed to do to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was I went home to visit my father in Cincinnati because I hadn't seen him in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in Cincinnati, I called up the Cincinnati Playhouse just on a whim. And I said, may I come in and do a general audition? They said, sure. So I come in and do this audition, and they stood me up.
Oh.
So the guy called me the next day, and he said, I'm terribly sorry. We had an emergency on one of the shows. We had to have this last-minute production meeting, and I couldn't get out of it. I'm terribly sorry. When are you going back to the Twin Cities? And I said, tomorrow. He said, what time? I said, well, my train leaves. See, I couldn't even afford to fly. I was taking Amtrak, which took forever.
Yeah.
And he said, can you come down to the theater before you catch your train? I said, sure. So I go down there, I auditioned for him, and he said, I think you're really good. We may have something for you. And I said, can I be frank with you about something? He said, please do. And I said, I've been out of school now for almost 2 years. I helped start a theater company in St. Paul. And as far as I'm concerned, that is my apprenticeship. If you want me to work here, I would be delighted to work here, but it's a card.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make me equity. I'm not going to do this registered membership candidacy route. I will not do that. I would love to work here, but it's a card, and that has to be looked upon as a precondition. And he said, well, I understand how you feel, and I agree with you, but I can't just guarantee you that right now. So I go back up to St. Paul. The next day, he called me, and he said, I have something for you in a production of 12th Night, and it's an equity role. Do you want it? And I tried to keep from doing a war whoop over the phone,
Yeah.
I said, absolutely, I'd love to. And Michael Murray directed a wonderful production of 12th Night that was set in early 19th century South America.
Mm-hmm.
The production concept was Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel 100 Years of Solitude. And I had never heard of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, to my shame. And I ended up buying that novel at a Barnes & Noble and just devoured it in like two days. And I have been a big fan of his work ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I got my equity card.
Nice.
And after that, I did a play in Chicago, and then Cincinnati called me and asked me to come down and do 2 shows in tandem. And then right before the second show ended, they offered me a third show.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, I helped start a company. I've got 4 equity shows under my belt. I have my union card. I think I'm ready for New York now. I didn't want to come to New York without an equity card.
Right.
And I didn't want to come to New York directly out of college because I had seen friends of mine try to do that, and they got the crap kicked out of them, and they got discouraged, and they gave up.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I don't want to give up on this. So I know I'm not emotionally or psychologically ready for New York. So I spent a couple of years in the regions growing up and getting my union affiliation squared away. So when I came to New York, I had some people to call and I had some credits, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how I did it.
Yeah, you joined.
Is that a formula for success? I don't think there's any such thing. I think you have to be as prepared for what may happen as you can.
Right.
Knowing that life is probably not going to cooperate. It's
a formula for paying dues.
Well, yeah, it's a formula for staying in it. You know, do you want this or not? How important is this to you?
Right.
Do you feel like you won't be a complete human being if you don't at least try this with all your heart? If you try it with all your heart and fail, okay, but are you going to feel like you're a complete person if you haven't at least really given this your best shot?
Mm-hmm.
And I always said yes. I want to do this. And I've been very lucky. I've had enough success along the way that I never felt like I was wasting my time.
Oh, that's good.
I ended up getting my break in the industry by pure happenstance. By bullet hitting another bullet in midair during a Civil War battle, random luck. Just, I got to New York in 81. Remember when John Lennon was shot and killed?
Yeah, December of 80.
Yeah, I arrived in New York exactly 2 months to the day after he was shot.
Wow.
And I slept on a friend's couch for a couple weeks. And after about 10 days, I ran out of clean clothes, and I had to wash clothes. So I go to a laundromat on 2nd Avenue, and it's full.
Mm-hmm.
And a very nice woman said, there's another laundromat a couple of blocks down on 2nd Avenue. I go into that laundromat, and there's a guy in there that I had gone to school with that I hadn't seen in like 6 years. And he's like, Jay, how you been? Oh, man, how long have you been in town? You know, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I need to get settled here. I need to find a bread and butter job so I can get my own apartment, you know, because I can't stay with friends forever. And as soon as I have a few bucks to rub together, I would like to take class again because I don't want to get rusty. Can you recommend somebody to take class with? He said, oh, absolutely, Terry Schreiber. And I said, okay, why do you recommend him? What is it about him that you like, and why do you recommend him? He said, well, for one thing, he's sane. And he is not some embittered, angry refugee frustrate from the industry. He still works in the business. He's a director.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is not going to waste class time with a bunch of embittered, angry monologues about how unjust and screwed up the business is. He doesn't have that kind of bitterness in him.
Yeah.
So he won't take out his frustrations on a bunch of students. His method is very similar to the Actors Studio. He himself studied under Michael Howard, who was like a disciple of Lee Strasberg.
Mm-hmm.
Some important schisms, you know, some important variations.
Right.
I mean, Strasberg, they will make you sit there and think about your dog that got run over when you were 3. And it's like, oh, okay, this is all very well and good, but how about the play?
Yeah.
So Michael Howard was, you know, kind of a get off your ass and figure it out version of Strasberg. And that was pretty much Terry's method. But Terry Schreiber had a reputation for occasionally using students from his classes that he thought were particularly good in his professional productions. And I thought, well, okay, that's the kind of person I want to study with.
Mm-hmm.
I want to study with somebody who has an ongoing, viable career in this industry. I spent 4 years at Ohio U being taught by people who had given up. And I would rather listen to a pair of tennis shoes bounce around in a dryer. You know?
Yeah.
So I got into his class. And after I was in his class about 2 months, he said, listen, I'm going to be doing a play at the Syracuse stage called K2. It's a 2-man play, and I'd like you to read for one of the roles in it. And that's how I got K2.
Nice.
K2 was done by 3 different regional theaters simultaneously. The Theater by the Sea in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, the Syracuse stage, and the Arena stage in Washington, D.C., and that's where Ming Cho Lee did the set that ended up being used on Broadway. The play got optioned to go to Broadway, and the writer, Patrick Myers, liked Terry Schreiber's direction best of the 3 productions that were done. So then they started playing the name game. They had to find a couple of names to play the 2 characters. You know, they aren't going to let these 2 regional theater guys walk into a Broadway production.
Yeah.
So they went to Pacino first, and he couldn't make up his mind which of the 2 roles he wanted. And then they went to Roy Scheider and John Voight, and they were all set to go, and then they were each offered films, and they pulled out. Mm-hmm. Then there were a couple of other names that got banged around, and then they settled on Jeffrey DeMunn and Peter Boyle. Jeffrey DeMunn is on Billions now, and he was in The Green Mile, and he's done a ton of stuff. And they asked me and the guy that had done it in Syracuse, Michael Toledo, to understudy Jeffrey DeMunn and Peter Boyle. Mm-hmm. And for a number of reasons, Peter Boyle didn't work out. He is no longer with us.
Right.
So I'm going to be a little guarded. But they told us not to attend rehearsal for the first 3 weeks because they knew that we already knew the show and they didn't want to pay us. Mm-hmm. So I show up and go on contract tech week. That means you have an audience in about 10 days.
Right.
So I come in, and Terry Schreiber called me aside, and he said, "Look, you need to get ready." And I said, "What do you mean get ready?" And he said, "No, you need to get ready." I said, "You mean like step in here?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Terry, I'm 28 years old. I'm a welder's kid from Cincinnati. I have never even done a showcase in New York City. There is no way that they're going to put a kid my age into a 2-character play on Broadway. That is not going to happen." And he just said, "Look, do you see the stage floor?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "They had to cut it out. They had to cut the stage floor out of the Brooks Atkinson Theater. They had to build the set from the basement up out of sight of the proscenium arch, and as you can see, they had to remove the false proscenium. That's where all the money went. Wow. There is no more time, and there's no more money." After they installed the set, they realized they had misfigured the center line by 18 inches. They had to move it. It took 38 straight hours.
Wow.
That's where all the money went. We have no more money, and we have no more time. Get ready. And I said, "Terry, they will cancel this before they will let me do it." And he put his hands on my shoulders. He looked in my eyes and said, "Get ready." And that's what happened.
Wow.
So I ended up doing K2 on Broadway.
Wow.
And then Robert Benton, you know him from Kramer versus Kramer, Places in the Heart, Still of the Night, The Late Show.
What's Up, Doc?
Billy Bathgate, yeah.
Yeah.
And Nobody's Fool, Feast of Love. Twilight. Robert
movies.
Benton came and saw it, and he asked me to come in and meet with him, and they gave me a script to read called The Texas Project. And I noticed that they're filming it in Waxahachie, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in to meet with him, and I said, are you all going to actually film this in Waxahachie? And he looked at me, and he said, you can pronounce it. And I said, yeah, my father was born there. So after K2 closed, and after like a couple of months, I went down to Texas to film Places in the Heart. It didn't have a name for a long time. They were just calling it the Texas Project.
Mm-hmm.
And then they settled on the name Places in the Heart. And then my father passed away about 6 weeks after I finished filming it. So he never got to see the movie.
Oh.
But, no, he was really proud of me.
Oh, that's good.
Now, the rules for your podcast here, what is the deal about swearing?
Oh, you can swear all you want, Jay.
Well, I've been holding off because I didn't know what, I didn't know what the deal was. I thought, when he and I were alone, my father would say, God damn, I wish you'd get out of that asshole business. You ain't going to accumulate nothing. And then when I was away from home and he would be at the grocery buying food and he would bump into somebody, he'd go, oh, Jay's doing a play in Chicago. Jay's making a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was glad. Things were.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, you worked with a lot of greats in that movie. Sally Field, Ed Harris, John Malkovich, Danny Glover. Did you take away anything watching them and learning from them?
Yeah. I learned that film acting is about behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things about film acting that I'm probably going to spend the rest of my working life learning. Because I keep forgetting it, and I keep forgetting, and I keep having to relearn it. The camera can pick up intention. So the quality of concentration that you have to make a film is a lot more specific. And it's harder to sustain in a lot of ways than it is on stage. In the theater, you're constantly being told by the director, look, what you're doing is wonderful, but it's too subtle, and it's not going to read past the fifth row. You have to make it bigger. And then when you get in front of a camera, you will hear the director say, oh, good God, I don't need half of that. Cut it way down. Film acting is about behavior. And I got to observe people that were comfortable with that ethic, who had a lot of experience with it. And I saw them adjust their performances depending on the size of the lens and how close the camera was to their faces. And I thought, my God, the technique in that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that is such, how in the hell am I going to learn how to do that? I just thought that you had to mean what you say and invest in it. Yes, you do, but if you're not completely in the moment, it'll show. Because if they're using a big lens, and if the camera is close to you, like in a close-up, when they show that scene in a movie theater, your face is going to be like 12 feet across
mm-hmm.
on the movie screen. And if you're not fully in it, it shows. There's no hiding. And that's what I mean when I say the camera can pick up intention. The quality of concentration that you have to bring to the performance is a lot more specific, and it's difficult to maintain. It takes a lot of energy to maintain that throughout a shooting day.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to have a strong sense of where am I just coming from, what has just happened, why am I here, what do I need, what is going on, is this person listening to me, how much trouble could I get in saying what I'm about to say. You have to, it can pick up on what you're thinking, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
the subtlest things. Yeah. I learned how to keep my mouth shut from watching people. I learned that it's not necessary for me to have an opinion. No, I would just watch these people and their demeanor on the set, and they would, but also, and somebody actually came up to me privately and said this to me, and they said, "Look, I understand this is your first film," and I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, first of all, I would have never known that from watching you work, but not every film you do is going to be like this one." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, when all of us read the script, before we agreed to do this film, we all knew we had our hands on something wonderful and special. And everybody that is here working on this knows that, and everybody here is delighted and honored to be here. You are not going to have that on every film. Trust me." I won't say who said that to me, but and they were right. I have worked on some films where it's impossible to trust or respect the people that are making decisions, and you have to learn how to keep your face to yourself and watch what you say. And be an adult.
Yeah.
This is not a Montessori school. It's not a play date. You are not here to make friends.
Yep.
You are here to help these people tell a story. So if you're going to open your mouth to ask what is needed.
Yep.
What do you need? What do you need here?
And you worked with Robert Benton several times after that.
Twice after that. I did Nadine in 1986 with the late Rip Torn and Jeff Bridges and Kim Basinger, Jerry Stiller, and the late Glenn Headley, God bless her, and Bill Humans, and the late Mickey Jones, God bless him.
Yep.
Mickey Jones used to play drums for Johnny Rivers and Trenny Lopez.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, right when he first went electric.
Yep.
And Kenny Rogers in the first edition. And then he decided he wanted to act.
Yeah.
Great guy from Houston, Texas. Wonderful guy.
Yeah, he was great.
We kept in touch over the years.
Oh, that's great. And then comes one of my all-time favorite teen movies, Heaven Help Us.
Oh, my God.
How did you get so lucky into playing Brother Constance?
Well, I had my first real girlfriend in my life in high school was a devout Catholic. I mean, she came from a religious family, and she told me about what it was like going to Catholic school in detail. So I had a lot of background info. And the guy who wrote the screenplay, Charles Purpura, he had gone to Power Memorial High School in New York City. And like a lot of our crew were survivors of Catholic school, so all I had to do was ask something. I had a pretty good idea, but then all I had to do was ask someone. I got to tell you something. Over the years, I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped by police officers or firemen here in New York, and they go, "Excuse me, aren't you an actor?" "Yes." Did you do a movie about a Catholic high school? I knew that was you. Jesus Christ. Those bastards used to beat the shit out of us. You got that right. I went to St. Ignatius. That is exactly like those bastards were. A lot of cops and firemen in New York City went to all-boys Catholic high schools. During 9/11, during the cleanup after 9/11, I volunteered on a boat that was parked right inside the World Trade Center boat basin. And that boat was like a triple-decker coastal cruise vessel.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't large enough to be an ocean-going vessel. It was like for coastal cruises and stuff. Triple-decker. And what they did was they turned it into an aid station. And they had several buffet lines to feed people. And what my job was, I would schlep pans, stainless steel pans of hot food up out of the galley, up the spiral staircase. And I would stock these 3 buffet lines. And the shifts were 12 hours. So, okay, we have to have some meatballs, we need veggie lasagna, we need peas and carrots, we need mashed potatoes, we need bread, we need ice, we need drinks. Up and down all day, ding, 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 ding. And I was glad to do it because I wanted to volunteer to do something, anything. I mean, shit, this was my city. We got hit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have picked up dog crap if they asked me to. But one day these grimy firemen are in there eating. And this one guy kept looking at me, you know, and I'm covered in gravy and spaghetti sauce, and, you know, I got the apron and all the whole bit.
Yeah.
And he waved me over to their table, and he said, "You were in that movie, weren't you? You were Brother Constance, weren't you?" I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Jesus, I know that was you." You know, so that I mean, apparently that film for like a number of years was a firehouse hit. You know, they would show it on their VHS cassette players or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it became kind of a cult movie among police officers and firemen in New York. So,
wow. You never know who your audience is going to be.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So...
I have seen so many 80s teen movies where the authority figures are malicious, but Brother Constance takes the cake for me. Did you base him on a teacher you had in school?
No, I kind of invented a backstory for him.
Mm-hmm.
And the story that I invented for him was that he probably came from a very screwed up, dysfunctional home, and that the church was the only thing that saved him.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the discipline that he got enabled him to go to college and get a good education. And, you know, giving up the idea of marriage to him was like a small price to pay for the stability that brought to his life. So because otherwise he's just a sadistic bastard, which he ended up being anyway, because I had some scenes, I had some takes, rather, where I tried to get some more nuance in. And, of course, they ended up, when they did the editing, they ended up taking, you know, the shots that made him look like the biggest prick, you know.
Yeah.
But I had to find something about him that I could sympathize with, to give him a real reason to behave the way he behaves.
Mm-hmm.
How dare I rob these boys of the opportunity to find the stability that I found in my life? And I needed discipline when I was their age, so how dare I not help them get there? And if I have to kick a couple of asses for that to happen, well, then maybe I need to. But if these guys are left to their own devices, they're going to wind up getting arrested for fooling around with kids or something, you know. I mean, that's how I justified the character.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, a lot of people worked on that film. John Hurd, God bless him, he's gone now. Philip Bosco,
yeah, he just died.
Was an actor's actor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the mainstays of the roundabout theater throughout the 80s. He can do anything and everything. Shaw, Ibsen, Chekhov, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
William Saroyan, you name it. He was a magnificent stage actor and a wonderful film actor, too.
Yeah. everything.
And a very devoted husband and father. Had a big family, a lot of kids out in New Jersey. I can just imagine him hopping on that train to go to the roundabout every day. You know?
Yeah. What was it like working with Andrew McCarthy and all the kids?
Oh, God. Andrew McCarthy and John Hurd and I hung out together. Some of the stuff we did, I can't tell you. But
yeah.
There was exactly a 9-year difference in each of our ages. John is 9 years older than me, and I'm 9 years older than Andrew.
Yeah.
And one day we got to talking about the Kennedy assassination.
Mm-hmm.
And John Hurd said, yeah, I went to a Catholic high school in D.C., and when it came over the intercom, we all had to kneel next to our desks and pray for our president. And I said, yeah, I was in the 4th grade, and it was a Friday, and we always got an extra recess, and our teacher came outside and raised her hand, and that meant line up. And she took us in and told us. And Andy said, yeah, I was lying in my bassinet, and I was fucking with these brightly colored objects, and my mom had the radio on in the kitchen. I took a big mustard-colored dump right in my diapers.
That's a good one.
So we were...
I like that.
You know, we would always joke around with each other a lot, and we went out on the town a lot too, which I should probably pull the curtain at that point in the story. We raised a lot of hell. You know, went to a lot of bars together, and a lot of great meals out and late nights, and coming into work somewhat the worse for wear the following day. No, we had a lot of fun.
Wow, it must have been really difficult then to do that showdown at the end between you and him.
No, we just, did it. We just did it.
How was the...
We filmed that big final scene where he punches me and all the kids jump up and cheer.
Yeah.
That scene was shot in an abandoned school in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even have electricity in it. They had to run generators outside, and that's how they ran the lights. And the auditorium looked like a pigsty. They got all the grips in there with mop and glow, and they cleaned up the wainscoting and the paneling, and the place looked brand new. And that's where we shot that assembly scene, in an abandoned school.
Wow.
With generated electricity piped in from outside. We also filmed a lot of it at City College.
Mm-hmm.
Up on like 135th Street. Filmed it all over the place.
Wow. How was working with Donald Sutherland?
He was one of the most accessible, warm, funny people I've ever known. He had just lost his father, and I had just lost my father. And Heaven Help Us was the first movie that we each did after losing our fathers. Going back to our hometown and settling the estate and, the funeral and all that stuff. So we were both in kind of the same headspace. You're I don't care how old you are, you're a tall boy until you lose your father. That's like the final hurdle into adulthood. And
Never thought of that before.
I couldn't stop telling stories about my father. And, Donald's a lot older than I am. And he could tell that I needed to talk about my father. And I was telling him this story about one time my dad took me to Crosley Field to see the Reds play. I mean, this is like in the early 60s, a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept talking about my father's two-tone wingtip shoes that he used to wear. He looked like a 1930s gangster in these shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the middle of telling this story to him, and he got called away from our chairs. He had to go and do a pickup, and then they did the pickup, and then they did some turnaround with the camera. He came back to me about 3.5 hours later. He walked right up to me, sat down, and said, "What color were the shoes?" I mean, he picked up the story right where I had left off. And somebody of his magnitude in the industry being that interested in something that somebody like me had to say, I mean, that just blew me away.
Yeah.
He was just, he's a rabid baseball fan. He was a big follower of the Montreal Expos, which they don't exist anymore. They moved down here, and they are now the Washington Capitals.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
There used to be a team called the Washington Senators, and they moved out to Minnesota and became the Twins.
Mm-hmm.
But the Montreal team moved to Washington. I think they're the Capitals, right?
I think so.
All right. But when we were filming Heaven Help Us, he had a microwave aerial for his TV in his camper. And I'm walking back to my honey wagon one day, and I hear this banging on a window, and I look up, and it was him knocking on the inside of his window, and he beckoned me to come into his camper. And I sat there and watched part of a baseball game with him. It was like right when the 1984 season opened.
Wow.
And he had this thing called a baseball abstract, which is essentially a book of statistics. And the damn thing's as thick as the Chicago phone book. I mean, they print a new one every year.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball abstract. And he's looking up all these statistics on every player that, comes up to bat from both teams and all this shit.
Yeah.
Avid baseball fan.
Wow.
Really nice guy.
Oh, that's good. Then you did Street Smart.
Street Smart, yeah. That was filmed. We shot the exteriors in Harlem. And the interiors were all shot in Montreal. That was an experience going up to Montreal to work. We had this one scene where it was actually filmed in the Montreal lockup,
mm-hmm.
the municipal jail for Montreal. And the night before, these barge sailors had gotten in this big fight in some bar. There were like 12 of them in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all banged up and hungover and hurting. And the last thing in the world they wanted to put up with was crewmen stringing cable through the cell blocks and lighting up everything, and then us filming a scene in there. And there's a scene where me, Leonard Pike, the district attorney, has to come in and try to get Christopher Reeve to give me some information about one of his sources. The movie is about a magazine journalist who completely concocts a story out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
Because the magazine that usually buys a lot of his work is getting ready to cut him loose because he's hit a long dry spell.
Right.
So he concocts this story about a murdering pimp out of thin air. And as it turns out, it just happens to almost exactly parallel a real murder case.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the district attorney that is prosecuting Morgan Freeman for murder. And I'm trying to get him to tell me some people who may have witnessed the murder. So the magazine that hired him thinks that he's hiding behind the First Amendment, and they're going to stand beside him in the name of journalistic freedom, and no, you're not going to force our writer to give up his sources, and that's totalitarianism, and you can't do that, and we're going to stand beside our writer, and the whole story is bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
This all comes out at the end of the film, but anyway, I go in there to try to talk to Christopher Reeve, and he ends up blowing up at me and throwing me up against the wall, and then these guards come in and separate us. Well, you have to do the scene about 20 times. You shoot it and then again and then again, and then they turn the cameras around. You shoot it again and again and again. Well, these barge sailors are really pissed off because they don't want all that noise.
Yeah.
So they start yelling and cursing. The problem was they were yelling and cursing in Quebecois. So we couldn't use any of it as background noise. They're like, "Sacrement! Tu le poulet de quoi?"
Yeah.
And all that wonderful rough talk was, they had to overdub it with, American jail noises,
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of funny.
Oh, that's crazy. That was one of Morgan Freeman's, pre-fame movies.
Well, that's what popped him. I mean, Morgan Freeman was one of those actors who always worked, and worked a lot. I mean, he was on the Electric Company for 10 years.
Right.
And he had been on Broadway several times. He had done a ton of stuff at the Public. He played Coriolanus. Did The Gospel of Colonus on Broadway that Lee Brewer directed. Did Brubaker with Robert Redford. I mean, he was a substantial, well-known actor, but he wasn't a big star. Street Smart made him a star. He got nominated for an Oscar for Street Smart.
Oh, I didn't realize he was nominated for that one.
I think he should have won. I think he should have won. They gave, and this is nothing against Sean Connery, but they gave it to Sean Connery for The Untouchables.
Yeah.
But his performance as Fast Black was scary. It was so good. Because you never knew what he was going to do. And you couldn't take your eyes off him. And he had such texture and power in that performance. I thought he was amazing.
Oh, yeah, he's great in everything he does.
Oh, yeah. He was great in Glory. He's wonderful in Glory.
Glory, Driving Miss Daisy, The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, so many great roles.
Oh, yeah.
My dad took me to see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie when I was 6.5, and I collected everything Ninja Turtles during those years. How did you get cast in that?
I went in and read for it, and they made the offer like 6 weeks later after the audition. That almost never happens. And I didn't know what or who the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was. I had never heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
I never watched them on Saturday mornings or like whenever they showed their show. I had no idea. I had no clue as to who or what they were. I certainly had no inkling as to what kind of cultural phenomenon they were going to become.
Mm-hmm.
But we shot this in Wilmington, North Carolina at the De Laurentiis Studios.
Oh.
And they had all these animatronics inside the headpieces for each of the turtles.
Mm-hmm.
These hydraulic pumps and lifting devices inside the headpieces. And the puppeteers had these sensors that would actually touch their lips, and they would recite the dialogue along with the actors. And then the animatronic machinery inside the headpieces would form vowels and consonants when the turtles would speak inside the latex rubber headpieces.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you could see them forming vowels and consonants. It was weird. and that equipment kept seizing up and breaking down. And they would have to call the day, and then they would send the technicians in, and they would take the heads apart and fix this stuff. One day they had to shut it down for like 3 days and had a bunch of people come from the company that made the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to basically overhaul it. So I ended up getting a lot of extra time on that film, because of all the downtime we had.
What was it like working with Judith Hoag?
Oh, she's a sweetie. She was a lot of fun. She's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Nice lady. I didn't have. I only had one scene directly with her, and I think our other scenes were over the phone. You know, where I fire her. Most of my scenes were with the kid, the redheaded kid,
Michael Turney.
Yeah, but he's a director now. He directs and produces horror films.
Mm-hmm.
He's becoming kind of a big deal in that world.
Yeah, I just found that out.
I saw him a couple years ago. We had lunch together. I hadn't seen him since the shooting of the movie, and his mom friended me on Facebook, and I thought that name sounds familiar because she was in North Carolina with him the whole time we were filming.
Mm-hmm.
And we did some filming in New York City, too. You know, the scene where he jumps out of the car and runs away?
Yeah.
We shot that on 3rd Avenue.
Wow.
And I remember I was doing a play then, too. And then I was scared to death I was going to miss half hour. Like, you know you have to let me go by 6:30. You know that, right? You know.
Yeah. That movie has a darker tone than the sequels because it was coming right off the heels of the 1989 Batman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then
the film came out in '90.
Yeah.
I had no idea what to expect, and I went to an industry screening, and the theater was packed with these executives from toy manufacturers. And they're sitting there watching this film, and I can just see the dollar signs in their heads. You know, lunch boxes, sleeping bags, blankets, toothbrushes, Halloween costumes for years, action figures, you know, little inflatable swimming pools in the shape of a tortoise shell. I could just see them thinking of things to make out of this, you know,
mm-hmm.
how to market it. They even did a Mad Magazine parody of it.
Yeah.
Which I still have that sitting in a box.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, I remember that.
And I open up Mad Magazine. I had to have my Mad Magazine every week when I was a kid.
Oh, me too, yeah.
And then here I open up a Mad Magazine, and there's my caricature. There's me. They put me in it. It was funny. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, now they say that Mad Magazine is going away.
It's gone.
Oh, it's fully gone?
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, that's a piece of our past. I mean, that's like a tiny chunk of American culture.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there are people that have basements filled with cardboard boxes stuffed with like every issue ever made. I think it came out first in like 1953.
Yeah. I think around 1953 or something like that.
I bet there's somebody in northern New Jersey who has a house full with every issue ever printed. I'll bet you.
Probably.
Somebody with a comb over and
yeah,
thick horn rimmed glasses and eats TV dinners.
Yeah, probably. A couple of years ago, I saw you in Ted 2.
Oh, that was a blast.
I was probably the only one in the theater in my age group who knew who you were, and I was thinking, how the hell did Jay Patterson get in this movie?
I did his other movie, the one right before that, A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Mm.
And they had to cut my scene out, my big scene in A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he felt bad about it, so he thought, well, let me throw him a role in this. So
That's good.
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
Yeah, he helped me get the footage from A Million Ways to Die in the West to put it on my and he was a lot of fun to work with. Like if I tried something in the character, he would go with it, and his suggestions were always wonderful. And we had a lot of fun. Wahlberg's a really nice guy too.
Mm-hmm.
And Amanda Seyfried, that's who my last scenes were with. She played my daughter. So, yeah, great guy.
So have you always stayed in New York?
I lived in Los Angeles for 7 years. I went out there in '93, and I came back at the end of '99. I earned a living in Los Angeles. I did episodic. I did features.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God, enough people remember me from film that I would get calls to come. I'm sorry, enough people remembered me from theater that I would get calls to go back to New York and do plays either off Broadway or else in the regions.
Mm-hmm.
So I could keep wood under my feet, so to speak. I need to come back to the theater and work in the theater a lot because it charges my batteries back up. I think it's important for an actor to do. Stay. I mean, like, I love film. It's a whole different discipline, like I told you about, and the money's a lot better. But I mean, there's something about the theater. That's what got me in it. And there's just something elemental and emotionally and artistically nourishing about the theater that I really need to stay in touch with. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, thank God, while I was living in Los Angeles, I still got to do theater around the country and back here in New York. But as far as Los Angeles went, I couldn't seem to get on the right lists with casting people. I earned a living, features, episodics, indies. I did one pilot, and like a lot of actors would hear that and go, God damn, you were busy out there. There's something about Los Angeles. If you're not working, it can be the most god-awful, isolating place. Because the weather very seldom changes.
Yeah.
And there's this lassitude that can kind of seep into you. I wound up doing a hell of a lot of volunteer work just to stay busy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, thank God, I had a wonderful network of friends out there, so I could see my friends a lot. But see, that's another thing. The city is so spread out that you really have to make an effort to see your friends.
Mm-hmm.
You have to drive a long way to see your friends.
Yeah, there's lots of traffic out there.
And the traffic gets worse every year. I've been back in New York now almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And for a while, I would go out there every year to spend Christmas. And every year I would go out there for Christmas, the traffic got worse and worse. And there were more strip malls being built,
Mm-hmm.
And it just got...
Yeah, everything's changing over there now.
Oh, well, there's a lot of parts in Los Angeles, like, say, around the Fairfax area where they built that mall, they just kind of shoehorn that huge mall there by CBS.
Yeah.
That place is now the Bermuda Triangle. If
Yeah.
you go in there, you might not get out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Traffic-wise.
It's so crowded. So is there anything that you're currently working on?
Hi, you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I dropped my phone. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is there anything that you're currently working on?
I'm on a hiatus right now from a web series, a thing called It's Freezing Out There. A friend of mine named Pepper Binkley put it together. And it's about a young woman in her mid-30s who is debating whether or not to freeze her eggs. Because she's in a job that is kind of going nowhere, and she's in a dead-end relationship with her boyfriend, whom she decides to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole series is like about her seeking advice from various friends and colleagues about freezing her eggs.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, she's trying to earn a living as an illustrator. And I play her dad, and it is a hoot. God, it's a lot of fun to work on.
Nice.
You know, so like I've been doing that, and a lot of theater.
Mm-hmm. You doing a theater production currently?
No, I just finished a play a couple months ago. Wonderful play called God Said This, and that's about a Japanese American family in Kentucky. We did it at the Actors Theater of Louisville last year, and then it got moved to New York, and we did it again off Broadway with the same cast. We did it at the Cherry Lane Theater, and that was just wonderful.
Awesome.
A lot of fun to do. Yeah.
Awesome.
Doing the same play again with the same people and watch how it's grown and deepened and richened. It was just a real gift. I'm active in a theater company called the Ensemble Studio Theater.
Mm-hmm.
So they're about to start up their next season. We're also kind of on a hiatus there. We're in like the dead part of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all going to start up again next month. And I audition a lot, and I do voiceover work. So I'm busy.
You do cartoons?
No, I do commercial voiceovers.
Oh, commercials.
Yeah.
I heard that's like really hot right now.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I would rather not say brands, you know, because I don't know what the rules are about that.
Of course.
But
well, I'm glad that you're continually active, Jay, and I thank you for coming on today, and I hope you have continued success. And if you have any projects in the future that you want to plug, you're always welcome to come back on.
All right, man, great. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun, Jay. Thank you so much, and you have yourself a great day.
You are more than welcome, and you have a great day, too.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Jay Patterson. Ain't he a cool dude? Thank you so much, Jay. Great stories about the theater and movies. And I'm glad you're still out there slugging it out. And I like him a lot. Great guy. Great guy. A far cry from Brother Constance, I have to say. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.